Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Economics World. I'm your host, Samneet Kaur. Today, we are diving into an incredible, recreated conversation with one of the most influential economists, Milton Friedman. Everyone, welcome Milton Friedman to our podcast. So, everything you hear reflects his real ideas. So, let's get into it. Professor Friedman, let's start with something personal. You grew up in a time of enormous economic struggle. So, what moments from your life made you stop and think how this whole economy thing really works?
Thank you for having me. You know, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, to immigrant parents who worked incredibly hard just to keep our family going. Growing up, I couldn't help noticing how much economic struggles shaped people's lives, especially during the Great Depression. Watching all of that really stayed with me. It made me want to understand why these things happen and how policies can make life better or worse for ordinary people. Economics felt like the best way to make sense of those challenges and maybe even help solve them.
Mm. So, also, many people consider you one of the most influential economists of 20th century. So, what do you see as your biggest contribution, or I would say, if you had to choose just one idea, one contribution that truly defines your impact, what would it be?
Well, that's kind of you to say. If I had to choose, I'd say my work on understanding money and inflation had the biggest influence. I argued that managing the money supply is crucial for keeping inflation under control. That idea became known as monetarism. I also spent a lot of time explaining how economic freedom connects to political freedom. When people have the freedom to make their own choices in the marketplace, societies tend to grow, innovate, and prosper.
Well, monetarism can sound kind of abstract or like intimidating. How would you explain it in everyday language? Like to someone in a grocery store standing in a line with full cart of groceries.
Sure, imagine this. The government suddenly prints a lot more money. At first, people might think, yeah, hey, great, more money around. But the number of goods and services doesn't magically increase, so prices rise. And suddenly groceries cost more, rent is higher, transportation is more expensive. Your money loses value. That's inflation. And monetarism basically says, keep money growth steady, and you protect families from that kind of chaos.
So it's really about balance. Too much money chasing too few goods, and suddenly life feels expensive. Well, that really ties us back to your point about how money management affects everyone's daily life. Um, and this naturally brings us to a classic debate. You often collided with John Keynes. Could you boil down the key difference between your approach and his, like something simple and people could remember?
Ah, yes, Keynes. Well, he believed that when the economy slows, the government should jump in and spend more to boost demand. I always felt that approach created long-term issues, especially inflation. I believed in keeping monetary policy steady and letting markets adjust on their own. So, in simple terms, Keynes trusted the government to fix things. I trusted individuals and markets to sort out most of it themselves.
Interesting. So it's really about trusting people versus trusting the government for decision making. Okay, so a lot of young people today feels like prices are skyrocketing. If someone came to you and asked, "Why is everything suddenly so expensive?" What's the simplest way you would explain it?
Well, inflation is basically too much money chasing too few goods. If the government increases the money supply too quickly, prices go up. People feel it immediately. At the grocery store, at the gas pump, in their rent. Once you understand that, it becomes clear how important monetary decisions are because they show up in everyday life.
Oh, well, that makes sense. So, inflation isn't some invisible monster, it's something created by decision, policy, and money flow. Yeah, that really puts responsibility in the hand of the policymakers. So, yeah, so you have always emphasized economic freedom. In today's world of endless subscriptions, apps, algorithms influencing everything we do, what does economic freedom really mean for the average person?
Hmm. Economic freedom simply means people can decide what to do with their own money. Whether that's saving, spending, investing, or starting a business, those choices belong to the individual, not the government. And when people make their own decisions, resources naturally flow to where they're most useful. That usually produces better results than top-down decision-making.
Also, some critics say free markets just create inequality. How do you respond to it? Can freedom coexist with opportunity even when outcomes aren't equal?
Hmm. Well, yes, that's a common concern. Inequality exists in every system, even in the ones that try hardest to eliminate it. The real question is whether people have opportunities. Free markets create room for people to innovate and improve their lives. When you try to force equality, you often end up limiting the incentives that drive progress. So personally, I'd take a society with freedom and some inequality over a society with enforced equality and little freedom.
Well, yeah, so the focus shouldn't just be on equal outcomes, but equal chances to succeed. That idea really ties us back to your earlier points about choice, freedom, and responsibility. Here's a big hypothetical. If you could redesign one part of your today's economy, just one, how would you tackle first to make it life better for everyday people?
Well, that's a fun question. You know, if I had the power to change just one thing in today's economy, I'd start with the way governments handle money. Specifically, I'd redesign how the money supply is managed. Because so much of the economic trouble people feel, rising prices, unstable housing costs, the pressure on savings, all of it ties back to unstable money. If governments kept money growth steady and predictable, people could plan better. Businesses could invest with more confidence. Families wouldn't wake up wondering why groceries cost more this week than last week. So yes, if I could pick just one thing to fix, it would be monetary stability. Get that right, and so many other problems become easier to handle. It's like setting a strong foundation. Everything built on top of it works better.
That makes total sense. Fix the foundation and everything else flow more smoothly. It really loops back to everything we have discussed. Money, freedom, responsibility, and the opportunity for all are interconnected. Well, thank you, Professor. You have a complex ideas and made them human, clear, and relatable. That's what makes your work timeless. And thank you to everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. See you next time. Bye bye.